Hi, I'm Harry Watnick. This is today going to be a discussion about back pain. I have been a strength and conditioning specialist for 38 years, and the knowledge I'm going to share with you today has been something I've been working on for 38 years, and it's something you won't hear from your doctor, chiropractor, or whatever professional you use for your low back pain. These are no magic potions, just I'm going to keep it as simple as possible because I'm going to explain how the spine works, and hopefully you will take this information and use it in your everyday life to prevent back pain. I believe in prevention before intervention through education, which slows degeneration. So today we're going to talk about prevention and how the spine should be working. Yes, I'm going to start by reading some statistics. Everything you need to know to reduce your chance of experiencing low back pain. These statistics are a little on the age side, but if anything, they're worse, not better. 97% of all low back disorders are considered mechanical. The most common cause of disability among adults under 45, and the third most common cause in the 45 and over age group. Each year, more than 100 million workdays are lost, and over 40 billion are spent on lost wages, medical bills, and insurance claims. It's the leading compensable cost of injury in the workplace. And lastly, second only to the common cold as the cause of most missed days from work. So, how do we reduce that likelihood of you becoming a person with back pain? 4 out of 5 people will experience back pain in their lives. So today I want to start by just jumping into the biggest mistake people make is they do a lot of forward bending. And what I mean by that is they do this. They sit with their spine like that. And they do that all day long. They do it over the sink. They do it while they're driving. They do it at their place of work. They do it when they bend to pick something off the ground. You bend the spine, and I'm going to use some props here to explain exactly what goes on in the lumbar spine. This would be the lumbar curve in the spine down here. And when we bend forward, we cause this to, gotta be able to separate this. We cause that curve to go this way. And as you can see, the bow doesn't really want to bend that way because it'll snap. It will go this way. In fact, when a bow is used, as you can see, it will bend into the curve, store energy, and shoot the arrow. Well, when your back goes back, it does the same thing as a tennis player might do on a serve, store the energy and hit the ball. But to go the opposite direction is the culprit. The opposite direction is this, and if I do it too much, it will snap. They will start to develop stress lines here, and that's what happens to your lower back. Your lower back also will develop stress to it because it's going in an unnatural position. So what you want to do is try and keep your torso as erect as possible during all motions. I know at times it can't be helped, but you want to bend from the knees. You want to, if you're going to bend over a sink, you should support your weight with one hand and wash your face with the other. The problem is we are all creatures of convenience and immediacy. So we want to do things the fastest way, not necessarily the mechanically the best way to go about doing an event. If you wanted to pick something off the floor, we're going to be creatures of immediacy and convenience, and we're going to bend like this. But here again, the spine is placed into an unnatural position. You really want to bend from the hips and keep the torso as erect as possible and pick up the item off the ground. Also important is your internal muscular corset. People wear braces on the outside. They are an outside corset outside the body, and they are doing the work that your abdominal muscles and your lower back muscles should be doing. If you keep them toned and on, as I like to say, you will have an internal corset that will effectively keep your spine out of harm's way. It will keep it operating in this in a almost like a tube effect. So if this is your spine, and if you don't have the muscles contracting, the spine will bend too much in either direction. You can bend too much actually in this direction as well, but it's a little it's mechanically more safer than to go this way. So by keeping your muscles taut, oh, that wasn't supposed to happen. When you keep it in the two, when your muscles are toned and tight, the spine is kept in a anatomical position that keeps it out of harm's way. Okay, keeping in line with our conversation about the proper position of the spine, I'm going to give a demonstration here of why you want to keep your torso as vertical as possible. So this bar has weight to it. As long as he's holding it straight up and down, and the center of gravity falls in the base, Carlton's having no trouble keeping it in place. But if he were to lean forward, this gets more and more difficult for the muscles to hold the bar in place. In fact, if I even put a little extra weight here, he would lose the battle. His wrist muscles would give out. So that's the same. Thank you for that. The same thing occurs with our spine. When you stand tall and vertical and erect, there's zero stress. Well, virtually zero stress on the lumbar region. But as you lean forward, the bar, like the spine, like the bar, will because of gravity falling now outside the base, will pull you down and will strain the lower back muscles and the ligaments that connect bone to bone. So you want to just try and stay as vertical as possible doing all motions, keeping your abdominal muscles on, just pulling them in. You don't need to suck them in so you can't breathe. They're not part of respiration. So you just want them tight enough that you can pass the poke test. They should be taut. And that creates that wall effect we talked about earlier. If you continue to bend forward, what will happen over time also is something I can show through a demonstration that's pretty impressive. So these are vertebrae in your spine. One vertebra sits upon another vertebra, and so forth. This is 3 vertebrae out of 25 in your spine. We have 7 cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, and the sacrum actually is 5 fused. In the vertebrae have cushions in between. Those cushions are supposed to be rubbery and gelatinous, and they absorb shock. As we make contact with the ground or we jump, they cause the spine to work as a spring, so you get this effect. And that is a good working spine when it does that. What happens is, as we get older, the discs lose their gelatinous, shock-absorbing abilities, and they turn into more. They go from this gelatinous stuff to this, more like a dried sponge. And that has no ability to absorb force and to help in mobilizing the vertebra on above and below each other. So, vertebrae need to have some movement, and that movement changes from different areas. The cervical region has the most motion because it's under the least amount of load, and as you go down, the vertebrae get larger and less mobile. So with the lumbar region having the least mobility, but they're the largest to handle load. But another important factor is on each side of the spine, the front and the back. This is the back. There are these broad bands of ligaments called anterior and posterior longitudinal ligaments. And when you bend forward your whole life, scrunching down into the forward flex position, the ligament changes. And a great demonstration is this plastic bag has the same principles as a ligament. It's flexible, moves side to side, but it doesn't stretch. And it connects bone to bone. So you would have this ligament connecting all the bones on the front and on the back. What happens is as you bend forward your whole life, the ligament changes. And what it does is, under load, it starts to do this. Watch my two fingers and they will separate. All right, and then if I let go, it stays. So that ligament is not going back into its original shape. It's now elongated, and that doesn't happen overnight. It happens over years. So now, if ligaments connect bone to bone, it's clear what happens. Those bones now have extra play in them, and that's called a mechanical change and instability now in the spine. And when that happens, you get the formation of spurs. This is a clean a motion segment. A motion segment is one vertebra sandwiched by a shock absorber and another vertebra. And as the ligaments elongate and have play in them, the bones start to touch each other and they change their appearance. The geometry of it now is more incongruous surfaces, and they now could cause pain and ultimately lead to bulging discs and pinched nerves. And the important part that I want to continue to hone on is that the spine, the lumbar spine, your spine has 4 physiological curves. The one in the neck is a lordotic curve. The one in your thoracic region is a kyphotic curve, and then you're back to a lordotic curve, and then the tailbone is back to a kyphosis. And why are those curves important? Because again, when we walk, the spine needs to work like a spring. It needs to go like it takes the energy of the impact with the ground and stores it and then springs it up and basically keeps the spine out of harm's way and allows us our bodies to work more efficiently and effectively. When the spine loses those curves, and we lose those curves, you prop your head up in bed reading, you take the curve out and you get what's called a military neck. The spine will go into the curve, but in the other direction, it will only go straight. It will go to what's called a straight segmented column position, but it won't go the other way. Like this bow, it will snap. Well, your neck's not going to snap, but the ligaments will get stretched out and lead to pain and disability. So if you prop your head up in bed, you're going to get a military neck, and that's going to you're going to lose the curve. If you do a lot of forward bending, you're going to lose the curve in your lumbar region, and you're going to end up with a straight pole. If the spine is a straight pole and there's no more curves, if I drop this, it could damage the floor. If this were a spring, it's shaped like a spring and it had the curves in it, and I dropped it, it would hit the ground, absorb the energy by flexing and springing up. But if I were to drop this straight pole, it could damage the floor. So I'm not going to do it. So that's what's happening to people's spines, is they're losing those physiologic curves. They're getting basically a straight pole. So when they walk, with every strike, that strike sends a shock up the spine, since it's not being absorbed into the spine, into the discs. And again, remember the discs are losing their gelatinous shock absorbing abilities, and they're turning into more of a sponge as we get older. As we age, the water content of our discs diminish. It loses its hypolytic abilities. In fact, in the morning, as we get older, well, at any age, when we wake up in the morning, there's actually more water in them. And then as the day goes on, the water leaks out. So you're actually taller in the morning than you are any time of the day. But on the other hand, as these discs lose their water their hypolytic activities diminish as we age, the height of the disc shrinks permanently. And we all lose height as we age, and the reason being, as these discs lose height, all you need to do is lose 1 millimeter of height in each disc. And there are 24 discs in the spine sandwiched between the vertebra. And if there's 24 discs and 1 millimeter and 24 millimeters make up an inch, it's easy math. You're losing at least 1 inch. When does this happen? They say it starts happening after the age of 20. We start losing disc height space, but it varies from person to person and genetic influence. So, but by the age of 50, we've all lost at least an inch in height, and then it goes from there. So we want to try to maintain the health of the spine, keeping the lordosis in your spine. Now, again, you don't want to go into hyperlordosis, but you want to maintain the curve in your spine and avoid a lot of forward bending. You know, sit-ups should not be done full sit-ups. They strain the back. Again, bending over the sink is a problem. Bending over your trunk is a problem. Some of these can't be helped, but if you keep your muscles on, they can keep you, you can maybe get away with a little forward bending as long as your muscles are contracting front and back to hold you in that tubular pathway. But none of this stuff usually stuff happens overnight. It's called, and this has a comical component to it, the word creep actually is a mechanical term. Its definition is progressive deformation under constant low loading. So if you were building a bridge or a house and your engineer did not know what the word creep meant, I wouldn't use them, because that means that bridge or house will not stand the test of time. It will eventually collapse under the load. So in the body, the word creep is advanced to progressive deformation of soft tissue under constant low loading. So if you're constantly flexing like this, that's a constant low load, and the ligament will start to stretch out and hold that position, and now you're really screwed. Because you can't bring the ligament back to its original shape, and now the bones will have extra play, and hence the 97% of all back pain is mechanical in nature. The other 3% being tumors and congenital concerns and fractures. But if you can limit the amount of mechanical stress to your spine by proper body mechanics, proper standing, bending, sitting, lifting, you can limit the wear and tear that is ultimately going to occur, because as bipeds we haven't evolved actually enough to work more efficiently. So we all get progressive degenerative changes, but we want to limit it and slow the rate of it, so we can have less days off work and be able to be the weekend athletes we like, and not be running to doctors all the time and getting answers that are unsatisfactory. So here is our spine. Here are the curves that I talked about earlier. This is the base of your skull. This is the cervical region with a lordotic curve. This is your thoracic region with a kyphotic curve, back to a lordotic curve in the lumbar region, and then back to a small kyphotic one in the fused sacrum, which is 5 vertebrae fused into one. So if you bend back, the spine will bend in the lumbar region like the bow from the bow and arrow. And if you go forward, it's not going to want to go much past straight, what we call a straight segmented column. It becomes the pole. You take out the curves, it becomes a straight pole. And again, when you make contact with the ground, you're absorbing a lot of shock. You can see the great disc space between the vertebra. there's a bulging disc down there. These are your nerves leaving the spine. These pieces that come off the rear of the spine are called spinous process, and that's muscles attached to them. So as we age, these discs again will lose water, they'll lose height, and that really can't be helped. I suppose, you know, staying fit can ward off some of these effects, keeping the muscles strong and protecting the spine. The ligaments that I talked about earlier, there's a ligament that runs down the spine in the front, and there's a ligament that runs down the back that would be inside the spinous process. And that's the ligaments that, the one that gets all elongated from forward bending is called the posterior longitudinal ligament, and that one gets damaged when you do a lot of forward bending and you hold that position. Over time, creep will set in, the progressive deformation of soft tissue on the constant low loading. Your ligament will change length, and it will go from holding two ligaments, hold two ligaments together nice and tight. The ligament will then change in length, and now you got a long, loose ligament. And it's the same concept that happens in your shoulder when you dislocate it. The ligaments get torn and they change length, and now you're going to have a shoulder that will dislocate all the time whenever you go into what we call the dislocate position, unless you have it tightened up. Same thing with the ankle. You turn enough ankles, ligaments change their length. Now they're holding bone to bone less loosely, and you have an ankle that goes over more easily. Well, the same thing is happening in the spine. You don't hear it talked about, but it's the main reason for mechanical instability in your back. And again, it's a problem because of the way we move about during the day in our relation to gravity. It's all about gravity. Gravity's constantly pulling down on our spine, and the problem is our center of gravity is such in our back that our lower back muscles are on all day as anti-gravity muscles, holding us up like a mast, the sail on a boat, and the abdominal muscles kind of get all stretched out. So the abdominal muscles have to be consciously turned on by us. The back muscles are on automatically. There are anti-gravity muscles in the neck, in the back. They keep that the mast vertical, like on a boat. They're guy wires. So to keep to keep your spine healthy, we want to try and avoid the forward bending under load. Again, as you go forward, your spine is picking up stress because gravity is now pulling down on your spine, which is now a lever, and it gets heavier and more strain on the muscles and the ligaments in the lumbar region. The lower part of your spine is taking all the abuse. It's designed to take abuse because, again, as you go down the spine, you can see how big they get, so they can absorb and dissipate stress and shock. But the larger the vertebrae get, the less mobility you have. So up here we have great mobility in the cervical region. Moving in all different directions, and you have pretty decent mobility, except that the rib cage gets in the way. But down here you have very limited amount of bending. You can go into the curve, but going forward again, it's just going to go minimally up to maybe straight, and then it'll stop, and the ligaments will change if you just do it all day long. I consider the changes kind of like, you smoke for 20, we know that smoking is harmful, but the effects aren't felt for 20, 30 years. We know that steroids could be harmful, but we won't know the effects for 20, 30 years. And the sun, 20 or 30 years. Well, the same thing here. If you constantly forward bend and you change the ligament length and you get a mechanical instability, 20, 30 years from now, you could start to feel the effects. You know, back in the day, in junior high and high school, we were taught to sit all the way up for sit-ups. That was very harmful to our spines. And I do believe I'm feeling that effect now from doing all those full sit-ups when I was younger. I'm gonna throw some big words at you. If you do a lot of forward bending, you will stretch out the ligament that I talked about, and you will get what's called retrolithiasis. It is the shifting of the spine backwards. There's something called spondylolisthesis where your spine is shifting forward. That's a congenital disorder from a weakness in the lower lumbar area. But retrolithiasis is the opposite. The spine will move backwards because of the weakness in the ligament that, the ligament changing its proper length from the forward bending, constant forward bending. So I can't hit on it more than that. And just when you go about your day, you want to limit your forward bending. Try to keep your abdominal muscles in an on position and bend from the knees, trying to keep your spine as vertical as possible. And I mean, you still see full sit-ups in workout classes. You see stretching of the hamstrings where they bend forward. There are better and safer ways to do it. So my motto is, if you want your back to say ouch, slouch. Another point I want to bring up is a pretty important one. The spine and pelvis share a component. The sacrum is the bottom end of the spine. You got cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacrum. The sacrum is also a component of the pelvis. And why is that important? Because the sacrum is fused to the pelvis with the ilium, and the spine and the pelvis then have to move together. So if you're standing, this is forward, and you want to move to the right, you have to turn everything together. You can't have the pelvis facing forward and turn the spine. That is a recipe for, again, changing the ligament length relationship in the lumbar region. So when you move, you must turn the spine and pelvis as one. So it's always like this. And when you get out of the car, people tend to get out of the car by keeping one foot in and one foot out. So now the pelvis is locked forward, and then you're getting out like you have the right foot still in the car, the left foot is now out, the spine is locked in a frontal plane, and now you're twisting the spine. You're turning the spine to go out of the car, but your back leg is trailing and not out yet, and the spine is being wrenched. So to get out of the car properly, you must swing both feet out, and you lift the package. You must take the package and move it with the spine and pelvis as a unit. Think of your spine and your hips as one piece, and they must go together. When you see an athlete swing the bat or tennis, they have to get that back foot up in the air or off the ground to clear the hips so the hips and the spine work together. If you leave that back foot planted, you will leave the pelvis behind, you'll lose any power, and you're also wrenching the back, and again, the ligaments will suffer. I won't go into it in great detail, but our body is made up of 98% third-class levers. There are first class, second class, and third class. So we're made up of 98% third-class levers. And why is that important? Third-class levers are designed for speed of movement and range of motion. They're not designed for strength. And in a third-class lever system, the resistance arm will eventually overcome the force arm. The force arm can't compete with a changing resistance arm lever. and that's what happens when you bend forward. Your muscles are your forearm. They go from here to about to you know, mid back, and then as you go forward, your spine is the resistance arm, and that goes out to your head, and your spine, your muscles are trying to pull that baby back, and it's under a lot of stress and a lot of strain, and eventually back will either spasm or strain. So the levers that are designed for strength are first and second class levers. The wheelbarrow, I believe, is a first class lever, and a second class lever would be a seesaw, where it's designed for more balance. But you can make a second class lever a more powerful lever by moving the fulcrum towards the resistance arm and giving you more a jack. A jack is a second class lever, but a wheelbarrow would be a good first class lever. I think I got that right. I'm not sure if I got the first and second class levers mixed, but third class lever clearly is for range. We are designed for range of motion and speed of movement. We're not designed for strength. So someone with shorter arms are going to be inherently have a better force to resistance arm ratio, and they will less likely be stronger and maybe have less back problems than someone who's long and lanky. But will be more fluid and have greater speed of movement with longer levers, but not greater for strength. You never see a bencher with long arms. The levers are too long.